Welcome back to the Picky Girl Travels podcast. We've been on a break, but as I promised y'all, we would come back at it in November. This is the show for Black women who want more out of life and to live it as they see fit. The message here is all about defying convention, embracing adventure, and regretting absolutely nothing. I'm your host, Adelia Aborjade of pickygirltravelstheworld.com. Okay, so we are kicking off the month of November with a woman who is very much living life on her own terms. And it's not somebody a lot of us would think would have that privilege. My guest today is Charisma Freeman, who uh, packed up her son with a disability, a physical disability, and has been bobbing around the world for the last couple of years. It's a really incredible story that I think y'all are going to enjoy quite a bit. Charisma, thank you for joining me on the podcast today. Um, I wanted to have you on because, as I said in the intro, the podcast is all about Black women living life on their terms. And how you have been living your life definitely fits into that. It is very much you are bucking the status quo. So, and I wanted to give another perspective because often a lot of my guests are like myself, older. If they had kids, the kids are gone. And so it's a lot easier to live that life when there's nobody else you got to worry about.
Right.
So I am curious, take us back to the beginning of when you kind of made this shift in how you were living your life?
So, been a single mom for a minute, divorced, and I have two kids. My daughter at this time is about, how old is my daughter? 19. And my son now is 11. A few years ago, when she was in about eighth, ninth grade, my son got this diagnosis of KIF1A. Now, when he was born, I knew he had special needs and disability. My ex-husband was like, no, you're just making things up. Doctor was like, no, he's fine. A few doctors later, we find out they say he has cerebral palsy. So after seeing more specialists, they were like, no, it's not cerebral palsy. We don't know what it is, but there's something there, something different. So when my daughter was around eighth grade, that's when they decided to do a bit more research and found out he had this very rare disorder called KIF1A. KIF1A is a neurodegenerative disorder, so it actually gets worse over time. So you think MS, how MS progressively gets worse, that's what they think happens with KIF1A. But when we were diagnosed, it was only like less than 200 people in the world with
Oh,
it.
wow, that is rare.
Right. So we get diagnosed, and the geneticist and I start Googling, and we find this website, kif1a.org, and it shows us the couple of people in the world, and they had just had a meeting. So we get diagnosed. I get all this information. I'm told that it gets worse over time. I already love to travel. I had already taken my daughter and my kid, both of them to all kinds of places. And basically, I said, well, since it gets worse over time, and it seems like the kids were starting to get worse around 12, 13, I said, well, we're just going to go ahead and enjoy our life now. The natural progression is that you go to school, you go to college, you get a job, you get married, then you live your life, right? Well, if you're telling me my son gets worse by the time he gets to college and job and all of that, we're going to go ahead and live our life now. My daughter, being that she grew up in the same house, went to the same school, had the same friends, so I knew that travel life wouldn't work for her. Like that wouldn't go well. So I left. We stayed there, but I told her in ninth grade, when you graduate, get in college, we're out of here. People didn't believe me. People thought I was crazy. The only thing that really still stood in my way was that homeschooling aspect. Cause I'm like, I'm not a crunchy mom homeschooler type of thing. I need my kid to go to school and come home later. Like, I was like, I don't know about that. But COVID hit and I didn't have a choice but to be a homeschooling mom. So by default, I learned how to be a homeschooling mom. And that was the only part that was still missing for me. So when she graduated in 2021. She went off to start working, doing all of that. And a few months later, I was like, okay, well, we're going to try this out. We're going to try, I guess, I don't even know if it was a scouting trip. My job was getting on my nerves. I went on leave. I had some time. Nobody said my leave had to be in the States. And I found myself in Panama and Costa Rica. And that's pretty much how that went. That's the short version.
Okay. And what did he think, your son, when you mentioned to him, like, this is my plan? We're gonna go live it up. We're gonna go see the world and just kind of because from what I am hearing and from what I have heard you say before, this was not your typical, and I use typical in quotes because even this isn't typical, but this was not your typical, oh, we're going to move to another country. We are going to become expats. It's like, no, we finna bop around. And so what was his thoughts?
My son is so easygoing. He's really one of those kids, like, if he's with me, he's good. I was like, you want to go to Panama? Or I was like, you want to go to Costa Rica? Because our family, that's where they're from. So that was why those were my first stops. I was like, we can go see family. And he was like, do they have food there? I'm like, yes, they have lots of food. They have
That's the
different types of
important
food.
question. That's the important
He's
question.
like,
I'm
is
not
the
mad
food
at him.
good?
I'm not mad at him.
He was like, is the food good? And I was like, yeah, the food's good. So a few months prior to us leaving, I had actually went to Costa Rica. No, I went to Panama for a week and met family there. So I guess that was kind of my scout. And I went by myself and I really was just tracing my roots. Like I felt like I was on this path, this spiritual journey to trace my roots back. So I went to Panama, met some family, actually met my oldest living relative who actually ended up passing before we went back to Panama. So when I went, he took me to like my grandmother's house and all of these different places. So when I went to Panama with my son, it wasn't, it was familiar by that point. I had already done some things and met some people. So when we went, it was kind of like, I still had my house, I Airbnb'd it, but it was kind of like a vacation. It was just a vacation with no set date because it was a one-way flight. So I was like, well, we're going to go. And honestly, he's done well. Like, as long as we have 2 bedrooms, he comes in, he's like, which one's my room? Okay, thank you. We go in his room, we set up his Alexa, we get his tablet. Now we can't travel without the Alexa. So we set that up, we get him on Wi-Fi. I bring certain things with me. So it feels homely, like he had a blanket we would bring that disappeared on one of our trips. So, I would bring things that kind of reminded him of home. And oddly, he's done really well. I took my daughter with me for 2 months. She like, I'm done. I'm
She
going
ain't
back.
built for it. She ain't built for it.
She's built for vacations. She had to explain to her, this is not a vacation. This is life. So we can't go swim with the dolphins every day. And she's like, no.
Well, that's awesome that he was like, okay, long as they can feed me and they can feed me something good, it's good to go. Now, you mentioned that you were on leave and you were like, okay, well, we can go to Panama, we can go to Colombia. Was that as far as your thinking went? Like, were you
So
thinking multiple years or just kind of, we will go with the flow? I don't know.
So when I first left, I had a plan. Plans don't work. This lifestyle is not
All
meant
right,
for planning.
let's talk about that because that sounds contrary to what I think we would expect to be the best
Mm-hmm.
way to do it.
Right. So for me, when I left, I had a plan. I was going to go to Panama for a month. I was going to go to Costa Rica for a month. I'm very type A Virgo personality, right? So, I'm pretty much a fish out of water when I'm traveling to these countries. And I go to Panama with this plan. Well, let me back up. So I'm on leave because I'm a nurse practitioner. I was working in the middle of COVID. It just became crazy. Depression, anxiety, all of that kind of came in. So I went on leave. I was like, this is outrageous. I cannot do this anymore. And that's kind of when I started really focusing on some different things, real estate, all of that kind of stuff, really, really getting deep into it. So when I went on leave, I said, well, you know what? I'm gonna take a break from all of this. Like I said, I did the Airbnb for my house, and then we went to Panama. I got to my first place in Panama and I was like, okay, this is cool. I'm going to figure this out. I got there, I stayed in an Airbnb. It was nice. I only did like 2 weeks there and then I scheduled 2 weeks at another Airbnb. So it was nice, but I was like, oh, well, I'm not going to go and, be like the expats. I'm going to go and live like a local because, it doesn't make any sense why we would go in other people's country and we wouldn't want to live amongst them. And, we want to live in these high rises. That is absolutely ridiculous. Well, child, when I tell you, I don't live like no local no more. You see these walls, like a local. I went and it would be crazy between my Panama and my Costa Rica trip. My local would be, I went in the kitchen, opened the cabinet, and there's a Geico. There's sugar ants on the wall. And I'm like, there's ants here. And they're like, oh, they're just sugar ants.
Yeah, it's the tropics.
It was a sloth crawling through my yard. That was my local.
I don't like sloths.
Right. Every time I would come out, there was a bullfrog that would greet me. To the point they were like, that must be your spirit animal. Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you, spirit animal. Versus when I went to, I forgot the name of the city, but one of the places in Panama where a lot of locals go. And I did a condo and my condo was on like the 10th floor. We had a pool, we had a gym. We just walked out to the beach. Those were the differences in my lifestyle. I realized very quickly I was wrong. I cannot live like a local. I need to have certain comforts in my life. And that was like the first okay, this is reality. Like you think that you're just gonna come out of Atlanta and you're gonna be able to live on dirt roads and you're gonna know how to get your water because they introduced this water jug that I was supposed to pump water out of. I had to pay the electricity a certain way. If I didn't pay it, it cut off. Like there were things where I was like, wait a minute. And I remember even going from Panama to Costa Rica because I was trying to go with the flow. And I went to Boca del Toro, which is right next to Costa. Actually, let me back up. I had a flight to go into San Jose, Costa Rica. But where I lived, I was an hour and a half from the airport in this wonderful condo. Well, not taking into account Panama traffic, because don't think that when you leave the States, the traffic goes away.
No.
Even though it was an hour and a half, it took me 2.5 hours. So guess who didn't make their flight? This type A personality chick right here did not make their flight. So then I had to call my cousin because luckily I have family. They come back, they pick me up, and they take me to this hotel that I check into. Now I have to change my plan. I changed the plan. I decided I'm gonna go to Boca del Toro because I'm gonna cross over into Costa Rica because that's how my people did it. So
I already know this is not gonna be what you thought it was gonna be. I already know that.
It's not, but it sounded good on paper, right? Okay. Because you just pay $50 or whatever it is. So now I have to get to Boca del Toro. Well, you have to get on a little plane. My cousin that passed away, he called it the little bird. You have to you have to get on the little bird, which is probably 20 seats long, deep. And you have to go from there to get down to Boca del Toro. Then you get to Boca del Toro. I stayed there a couple of days. Wasn't my cup of tea, but I still stayed there in a little French hotel. Then I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna cross over to Costa Rica. Don't forget, oh, well, you all may not know, my son uses crutches and a wheelchair. So crossing over to Costa Rica does not mean, as it seems in the lovely brochure, that they drive you from your hotel to your new hotel. No, no, no. You literally cross into Costa Rica. You feel like you're part of a drug trade, right? So they pick you up from the airport, and then they know the person doesn't speak any English. So they pick you up, you get in this little van, they then take you to customs, the Panama customs, before you cross the bridge. Then they're hurdling you out because you have no idea what they're saying. So they're grabbing your luggage, they're hurdling you out, and they're pointing you into the direction of, like, I guess the Panamanian embassy. I don't know what it is. So here, nobody speaks English either. So you're supposed to present your passport to them. So you present the passport to them, and then they kind of do this, and you like, well, okay, where's the van? And they're looking at you like this,
Come
vamonos,
on.
and you like, what do you mean? So, I put my son in the wheelchair, and they're helping me with the luggage because I now have to walk across the bridge into Costa Rica. So I'm pushing my son in the wheelchair. I have a bag. The guy has my luggage. But when you get to the halfway point where the two connect, you have to then be passed over to the next person.
Because the Panamanian can't cross the border.
Right. So now, during your trade, you're passed off to the next person to continue on. Now, this is time of COVID. Well, COVID was getting a little slower, but you still need your COVID card. You still need your passport. So now you go to, I guess the embassy or the checkpoint in Costa Rica. You present all the documents there. My son's over here like, what's going on? It's hot. What? Why are we doing this? Can we go? Why we gotta wait? Why he got our luggage? What are we doing? So then you get to them. They have to go through the information. They don't speak English either because you're in their country. So you should know their language. That's your problem. So then we go there. Then after you get through that, the dogs are sniffing you as well. So after you get down there, you wait for the next person to come and corral you to now put you in the van to then go to your destination. So when I tell you this type A had completely just like anything that I knew as far as a plan, because my plan was to get on the plane, go to San Jose, and then from San Jose, go to my destination. I did not plan on being part of a cartel of it. Like, I didn't think they were going to be passing me off like a package.
But I think what you just described speaks to, I think a lot of people's fears of like, okay, I'm going to go try this thing that people don't do, but it's something I want to do. But they're like, not really instructions for it. And then you can make a plan, but sometimes your plan don't work because you don't know what you don't know until you don't know it. And okay, so you've already expressed type A personality. All of this chaos is happening. Did you rethink like this idea that y'all were going to bop around?
I don't think I rethought the idea of bopping around. However, I think I became more of a laid back type. Like you really had to, like, at first I would be mad, like I would be livid, like, oh my God, I can't, like, even when I left, I almost missed the plane. Even when I left Atlanta, because at that time everybody was getting a passport, and all of a sudden every damn body and their mama wanted to travel. Like, where did y'all come from? I had never been to the international Delta terminal, and all these people were here. So like I almost missed that flight. So of course I'm like, maybe it's not meant to be. Maybe it's not meant to be. And my friends like, it's meant to be. Go. So we, we get on that flight. Then we get to Panama. And then we miss that flight. And I'm like, maybe it's not meant to be. So then I'm like, well, hell, at this point I gotta go somewhere, right? So then we get over to Costa Rica, and that's when I'm in another local spot, the one with all of the animals. It ended up being a flood, an earthquake. When I tell you, any damn thing that could have went wrong. Like, it ended up being everything. But what was crazy about it was still amazing. It was still beautiful. Like, I got to meet family that I would have never gotten to meet. I got to go to Playa Negra. I tell every like Black woman, like, you have to go to Playa Negra in Costa Rica, in Puerto Limon at some point in your life. It is absolutely magical. I ended up meeting, we just meet so many people. My son is so open. I think people just gravitate towards him. I ended up having this lady. I went and bought some items, and she said that her father was the medicine man. He was the healer. So I actually ended up making an appointment and taking my son to see him. And he did some different things, medicine, saw him a few times, met some people that, they would take us over there. Oddly enough, he passed a few months later. Like, so we really met so many wonderful people, made so many connections. We would go out to Playa Negra, and they say the local people would go in the morning, bury themselves in the sand, and then pull themselves up. And because it's like the volcanic energy and all of that in this particular Black beach. So I remember even meeting one of my girlfriends now. She lived in the same city as me in Atlanta. We're in the grocery store, didn't know each other. Her grandson says, "Hey, that's Cam." And she's like, "Boy, stop it. You don't know what you're talking about." He's like, "Yes, that's Cam. I know him." And she's like, "Honey, we in Costa Rica. You don't know nobody. Like, how do you know him?" And, she said he kept bothering her. So she's like, "I know this is gonna sound silly, but are you from such and such city in Georgia?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "Did y'all go to such and such camp?" And I'm like, "Yeah, he went last year." And she was like, "Well, I'll be damned." Like, it was just crazy. Like, you made these connections. And I think everybody from Atlanta travels, because I met another lady. We ended up becoming good friends from Atlanta in Costa Rica. So it's like you have these things where you like, girl, you ain't want to go home yet. But it was the amazing things about it. It was the connections. So even though I experienced the missed flights, even though I had, the places where I'm like, I would never stay there again, even with the natural disasters I had never experienced, like literally the whole bridge to leave Puerto Viejo was wiped out. Like, one of my friends came to visit, she couldn't leave. There was no way to get out. Either you were going on boat or you weren't going at all. Like, and these are the things that happen. But when I tell you, I got back and I was like, okay, let me wait these couple of months, because I had a couple of months where I could sell my house. And I came back, got the house ready, and I was out of there. I still didn't want to be in the States, even with so much chaos.
Okay. All right. Um, you a couple of things in the story you just told. I think it illustrates the fact that you literally cannot plan for everything. And if you're holding on to that idea that well, I'm like, I want to, for you, the thing you wanted to do was travel with your son while, he could still really enjoy it. Um but for some other people, that thing might be something different. But this idea that I'm going to put off doing the thing so that I can work on this plan, and I'm going to plan and plan and plan and cover every contingency. Don't do that, y'all. because you can't. You can't, and I don't think it's necessary. Like the life you are living right now, you probably don't have every aspect of it planned out. You don't have a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, a 27-year plan, and all of that. So why, I guess maybe it's a way to procrastinate living our dreams when we say, okay, this is what I want to do, but I'm not ready yet. I haven't planned, I haven't figured it out. The other thing that you said was, I had to change.
Mhm.
And oh gosh, time don't exist for me. So I don't know how long ago it was, but I did a YouTube live about, like, are you ready to move abroad? And one of, like your story illustrates, there are all of these things that just aren't going to go the way you expect them to, whether that is the culture of the country, whether that is just, life, what have you, and the ability to kind of just, all right, it didn't work out today, we're going to try again tomorrow. That ability, the ability to do that is, I think, absolutely crucial. If you can't keep your knees bent and you can't roll with whatever the hell, like getting upset, because I used to be one of those people who, I don't, it's really hard. It's amazing to think about now because I'm just like, what else now? But like when things didn't go the way I wanted them to, I would get so angry and be mad at like everybody. And like, and what was the point of that? Because that didn't solve any problem for me.
Mhm.
So I think that is very interesting. And was it the shift in how you dealt with these things? Was it a cognitive? No. Was it a conscious decision, or did you just find you started to chill out a little bit more, just
I think
gradually?
eventually you don't have a choice. Like you like whether you do it on purpose or not, eventually you like it's just gonna happen. Whatever's happens, it's gonna happen, and you just gonna have to roll with the punches. Like you at some now, I'm not gonna say I don't get mad anymore because I do still get mad. I feel like I get mad a little less though. I feel like this has built a lot of character in me, and it's made me a better person because I can deal with stuff a little bit better. I still can't deal with the customer service people; they still get on my nerves, but I can deal with a lot of things a little better. I don't, even when I missed the flight going to Costa Rica, I was just like, well, I guess and now I was cursing going. I was like, I can't, I mean, really? But when I got there, I was just like, hey, can you come get me? They were like, what do you mean? I was like, I'm still here. Still here. I'm gonna book this hotel real quick. Can you just take me to the hotel by your house? That's cool. Because it just gets to the point where you're like, what are you gonna do about it? And I always, I tell people focus on your why. I focus on my why. I've always wanted to travel the world. I always told, when I dated, I told people, oh, I can't have no more kids because I'm gonna be backpacking in Kenya in a little bit. So you're gonna have to carry that kid on your back because I'm not. Like this, this is just me. Now the thought was never that I would necessarily take my son backpacking in Kenya with me, but it's like I don't know what like my rolling with the punches started years ago. Like I was a teenage mom. I was a mom at 18. I still went to college, became an RN. Everybody thought I couldn't do it. Then I, get married and do everything the right way, still get divorced. I had a child. He had special needs. Well, we got to create a new normal. I feel like a lot of my life has always been creating new normals. And over time, I feel like that has developed who I am. So this just kind of came to me as a new normal. Like I'm just following at this point, I'm like, I'm just following this path. I say, I'm gonna do things like on my YouTube channel. I'm like, I'm going to Africa in January. I'm going to Kenya in January. Well, y'all, I was supposed to go to Kenya last year. So I wasn't actually supposed to go to Panama and Costa Rica. My daughter being a teenager, I got so stressed out. I started having heart stuff going on. In the end, it was just stress. But my doctor was like, you ain't going to Kenya. She was like, that's not happening. I said, well, can I go to Panama? That's only like 3-4 hours. Can I go there? And she was like, okay, you can go there. So like it really it's just been ever changing. Like even now, I do one-way flights, and people are like, "Well, where are you going next?" I don't know. I think I'm going such and such, but we'll see what happens. I got to Mexico City. I was coming for a month, and I like it. So I was like, I'm not gonna see y'all for Thanksgiving. I'll catch y'all for Christmas. Like, and my uncle was like, "You're the only person I know go on vacation and then decide to just live there. How do you do that?" But I go with the flow. Some things are easy. I went to DR. I went to Dominican Republic. I only planned to be there a month or two. I ended up being there for 6 months. Why? One, I had met somebody. Two, I got hurt. I hurt my shoulder. I couldn't go. Like, I didn't even want to stay. I didn't necessarily want to stay with that person for a long time, but it was like a quick, like, oh, this is nice. This looks nice. This is good. Let me go home. It was one of those moments. But then I hurt my shoulder, and guess who couldn't go nowhere? You can't pull luggage and have a
No.
kid in a wheelchair with no shoulder. Like, I literally could not use my shoulder. And I didn't like the Dominican Republic. I didn't, because of like colorism and things of that nature, it wasn't my cup of tea. But guess who ended up being there for 6 months? So it's kind of like I can fight it as much as I want to,
Or you just
but
give into it.
right. And I think that was what it became. Some things I still fought, but there were things that I just started giving into. And I feel like I'm on this like journey because I learned so much being in the Dominican Republic, dating someone out there, living that life. I learned so much just about myself, developing my own character. It's really been amazing. It sounds, I mean, like when I'm listening to myself talk, it sounds like a jungle. Like it does.
But you know what? And I think what you hit on is what I firmly, firmly believe, and what this podcast is rooted in, is that like when we deny ourselves the things that we want to do because we got to check the box, because everybody in my family is expecting me to do X, Y, and Z, you don't really get to live your life fully. You don't get to develop fully into the person you could be. And because you chose to follow this path and it has taken you a variety of places, but like you said, you have grown, you have developed, you have improved. And I firmly believe that's because you are living the life that you are supposed to.
Right. Right. And I think that too, if you had asked me 10 years ago if I thought I would be doing this, I don't think so. I would have thought that I would have been traveling. But one thing that happened with me is that when I was packing from one house to another, I remember finding this like kind of like a yearbook from high school. And you know how in that yearbook you say you have this plan. And in my yearbook, I had this plan. I was going to be married. I was going to have 2 kids, picket fence, 2 cars, a dog. I was going to do some occasional travel, and I was going to be a nurse practitioner. And I remember sitting here looking at this, and this was right before COVID. And I said, I've done all of this. I was like, what am I supposed to do now? I'm just supposed to keep going to work every day. Like, and nobody, like, they were like, what do you mean, Charisma? Like, you're making great money, you're living a good life. I was in a good relationship. They was like, what do you, I don't understand. What are you talking about? Like, why wouldn't you, like, I don't understand. And I was just like, it's something missing. It's got to be something more to this life. I'm supposed to do this till I'm 65. And I would tell my mom, I'm going to retire by 40. And she, Charisma, nobody retires by 40. No, no, no. I'm going to retire by 40. I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I'm not gonna keep doing this. This is what's gonna happen. And as I got closer and closer, my mom was like, she's actually gonna retire by 40. Like, she's really going to do this. I think I was speaking stuff into existence before speaking things into existence was popular. Like, and it was just like, it's got to be more. Like, I still do some of my nurse practitioner stuff. I work in psych, and it's something that I enjoy. I only do it a day, maybe 2 a week. Some weeks I don't do it at all.
But that's supposed to be, I believe, our the nature of our relationship with work. If it's a work that you enjoy, you do it when you want to. This
Hmm.
idea that you do work because you're supposed to, and that's just what you do. I don't like that. I don't like that at
Hmm.
all.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's become more me doing investments, me doing my own business. However, I only do whether I'm working for me or for the company, it's only 3 days a week. My work week ends around Wednesday. Like I don't mind working hard Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. But after that, I'm on leave. I'm on break, vacation, whatever you want to call it. Me and my son are out in these streets. We walking around. He may be rolling around. We catching an Uber. We going to do whatever because that's the life that I want to live. I want to live that life where I'm like, okay, I don't like it here anymore. I want to leave. Let's go
Some,
somewhere else.
something you said, like you found that yearbook, you had achieved those things, and it's kind of like, what else? When I look at how we are conditioned in the US and our culture, I don't think we give it lip service, like you're supposed to be doing all these things for your happiness, but really I don't believe the system is set up about happiness. It's about comfort. It's about doing the things and living a comfortable life, but the idea that those things, that once you achieve them, that you would want more, I think that's just very unusual for how we think about living our lives. Like of course you've achieved all these things. What else is there to do?
Right.
And my situation, yours, just about every woman who has been on this podcast have all been like, yeah, but I checked the boxes, I did the things, and I wanted more. I wasn't happy. I wasn't fulfilled. So like I said, I think until you do the thing, whatever the thing is, you can't fully be who you were meant to be in this existence, like because you don't get to develop in the ways. So like if you had just stayed in your old life and just rinse and repeat, like I don't see how you could grow into the full version of yourself doing that. I just don't see
Right.
it.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And for some people, it works. Like I have friends,
I wonder
they
if it does. I really wonder.
they can't imagine. Like it's one of those things. They're like, I wish I could do that, and I'm like,
That's
but you
no,
can.
that's the thing. No, it's the limit that they have put on themselves because they can't imagine a
Right.
life that goes off the track, off of the predetermined. It's not, I again, this is something that has come to me. I think it's not, I don't know that there's anybody who is happy not doing that thing. If they're expressing like, oh, I really wish I could do, then you're not living your full life.
Right.
If you can fix your mouth to say that, you are not living the version of your life that you should be. Now, if you're one of these people that every day you get up and you like, yes, I'm going to this job and this is the shit, then maybe you are happy. But if you're
Hmm.
fixing your mouth to say, oh, I wish I could, then no.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for me, a lot of what I do is kind of based off of my grandmother because my mother is the first American. So when I went back, it was because my grandmother is born in Panama, born in Costa Rica, raised in Panama. And when the more I would travel, the more the elders in my family would start talking to me about different things. And the more that I would learn, because you know your grandmother as your grandmother, right? You don't really know your
She
grandmother
was a
as a
whole
whole
woman
woman.
before
Right,
she was your grandma, before she
right.
was your mom's
So
mom.
right. So, my grandmother went from Panama to New York. She went from New York, North Carolina, South Carolina. She lived in New Orleans. Like, my grandmother made her way around the world, around this part of the globe pretty well. And it's like, I kind of feel like a part of her lives in me, because I'm like, basically, and it was my uncle that told me that. He was like, you just picking up where she left off. He was like, and I'm gonna be honest, y'all. We got Airbnb, we got Skyscanner, we got all of this stuff. I don't know how my grandmother made it these places. She'd be on Greyhound. Sometimes I'd be right along there with her. And that was one of those things I didn't even remember. They were like, yeah, you rode on most of those bus trips with her, going from place to place. So it's like, I'm like, this is in my DNA. This is who I think I'm meant to be, without even realizing this was who I was meant to be. And it's like, I feel like people are put in your life. My daughter was put there to give me that stability and create this life for her. And then my son was put there to say, okay, no, yeah, this life is a little bit different. This life doesn't have to be 9 to 5, go here, go there, and come back home. Let's throw a little bit of spice into our life and do things a little bit differently, because it doesn't have to be that way. So it's like I've lived two separate lives. So in this part of my life, I'm moving, bopping. When I get somewhere that I like and he likes and we want to stay here and it's not expensive as hell, we will stay. Until then, we're gonna go until we don't want to go anymore. It's that simple.
Okay. Now, okay, so when you went to Panama, Costa Rica, you bought one-way tickets, you didn't have a return. How much time did you end up spending there?
I did about a month in each.
Okay. And
Mhm.
so and you came back to the US to sell your house. Was that originally part of the plan, or did that become part of the plan?
So I was just through. I was ready to go. I said I was ready to sell the house before I left, to be quite honest with you. But I said, no, let me be responsible. Let me Airbnb out the house. I didn't have an Airbnb guest. I prepared the house, put it on Airbnb, put the codes in there. And if somebody decided to show up, they were going to be the Airbnb guest. That's pretty much how I went with that. And I left. And when I left, I didn't know when I was going to come back. It was just, when they say you got all that stuff and you feel like if you leave the country, that stuff goes away. It didn't go away. No, ma'am. All of that stuff came with me. So in Panama and Costa Rica, I ended up dealing with a lot of my stuff,
Because it doesn't matter where you go, there you are. And
right.
if you ain't fixed your stuff, it's coming with you.
Yep. And I mean, I can fix my stuff on the beach, that's okay. So that's what I did. So I brought it with me, and I did a lot of healing in those places. So I felt like when I came back, I was a little bit more whole than when I left. And when I came back, whereas when I left, honey, I was ready to throw away everything. I was like, take the house. I don't want the stuff. I don't want the house. Sell everything. I'm done. Let me sign my name on this dotted line. I ain't never coming back here again. Like, that was how I felt when I left, with all of that stuff that had piled up on me. And then, so by having kind of that break that I had carved out, when I came back, I could come back and I could go through everything, get rid of stuff, store stuff, give stuff away, fix relationships that, I felt had been severed when I left, because when I left, I wasn't talking to most of my family. Like, I was done. I was tired, and it really just gave me that time to really get myself together. And it was a lot of shedding. It was a lot of crying. I remember one time, so my son, with the special needs, he has this thing where he feels like he can talk about you, but you can't hear him, but you can. So I remember one day, and he gives me a lot of these things where I'm like, okay, get it together, Charisma. I remember one day he in the other room, he's like, oh my goodness, she's crying again. Why don't she just stop it?
Oh
I
my
was like, well,
gosh.
damn, tell me how you really feel.
Oh my God.
But you know what? For me, that was my wake up call. Was like, okay, Charisma, it's time. Okay. You got rid of this part. It's time to move forward. And then I move forward. It's like when they say the things that come out of kids' mouths, and I move forward. So then when I went back after discovering all of these things about my family and my history and where my people came from, tracing my roots, it was just really amazing for me. So then when I came back whole. I was able to fix these relationships, and I was able to create that dialogue, and everything was wonderful because we all had been holding stuff,
Hmm.
holding stuff in. So I came back and I could take a couple of months to actually create a bit of a plan from there. Now, I ain't really have much of a plan. I went on Skyscanner and put in Atlanta to somewhere, and then found out what was the cheapest, and I ended up in Medellin, Colombia. That was my Christmas.
There are all kinds of plans. Some are very, very detailed. Others are more like broad brushstrokes. We're not
Yeah.
judging over here. Okay, so um, you came back. You were like, okay, I'm ready to let go. You went through your process. And from there, when y'all left again, the idea is just we are going to see the world. We will go where, Skyscanner takes us, where our mood takes us. Maybe we find some place we like to hang out, but really was the plan just to go and to see.
So, like all of my stories, Colombia didn't start any better. So, at this point, sold the house, top of the market, things are great. Went ahead, sold the house. So I said I wanted to go somewhere that was Christmas like. Put it in Skyscanner, did a little bit of research, and we ended up in Medellin. So I got ready to leave, and one of my family members was sick. I was trying to manage that while I was trying to leave, get to the airport to leave, and basically, well, if you remember, when you traveled during COVID, you had to complete a document on the website. Well, my flight was like 5:30 in the morning. Documents weren't, the website for Colombia wasn't working. Guess who couldn't get on the plane? Me. So, my son and I, after having to get there at 3 in the morning, we ended up coming back and not leaving, which was good because I ended up helping my family member. And then at the last minute, my daughter was like, she wanted to go too. She needed a break. A lot of things were happening. And she was like, okay, I want to go. All right, then let's go. So we tried it again a week later. She left the day after us, and then she comes. Well, when we leave this time, our flight gets in late. Our flight gets in like 9 o'clock, 8, 9 o'clock. It's late. We get a taxi. Taxi takes us to the Airbnb. Can't get in the Airbnb because at this point it is like 11 o'clock. Flight was delayed. It's 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock. Can't get in the Airbnb. Can't get in contact with the people. Airbnb is like, oh, just go to a coffee house, and we'll call them in about an hour.
At
I said,
11
ma'am, do
some
you
at
have
night.
any idea? And by this time it's like midnight. Man, do you have any idea what time it is? Ain't no damn coffee shops around here. So we're trying to get in. Luckily, the taxi guy, because he was like, oh, do you want me to wait? I was like, oh no, you could go. And he's like, no, let me help you up. So he takes the luggage up, can't get in. And he's like, okay, well, you can't get in and you can't speak English. Not to mention in Spanish, not to mention the security guard didn't want to let me in anyway. So we had to go through that. We literally drive around Medellin because it's Christmas. Christmas in Medellin is huge. Everything is booked, trying to find a hotel room in the middle of Christmas season, 12 o'clock at night. It takes us to like 1 something to finally get somewhere and get settled. And I stay there for a couple of days. And then my daughter comes in, and then I find an Airbnb, which is not as great quality as the other one, but the one that we were supposed to stay in, the taxi driver actually said it wasn't the best neighborhood. So we get here. The goal is to stay here for a little bit because I really want to go to Portugal. So we get here. I Don't like Medellin at all. We stay, we do some different activities, but I'm not a fan of Medellin. It's just not my cup of tea. But I don't know this because I've never been to Medellin. So we stay here. Then I said, well, we're gonna go to Portugal. But then I find out Portugal is cold. Nobody told me that Portugal was cold in the wintertime.
I
Never
mean,
dawned on
the
me.
cold is relative because I wore a jacket, but it was not like Ukraine cold. It wasn't cold like it was in Poland, but I would imagine compared to Medellin, it was probably a little cooler than that.
Right. So I'm like, okay, well, what do we do? Because I don't have no house, right? So it's not like I'm just going back home. So where do we go? So I have a friend, they say, oh, well, I know some people in Dominican Republic. They go to Portugal all the time. So it must be easy to go from there. Why don't you go there? And then, it's warm there. Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to go to the Dominican Republic.
I can't imagine it's easy to get from the Dominican Republic to anywhere other than like Miami and
It's
maybe
not.
New York.
It's not. It's not. Colombia, it is. That's why I could find a flight. So, okay, we'll go for a month or two. And this is how my journey began.
But again, it's important to share these things because some woman is listening to this podcast and has been dissatisfied with the way her life looks and has hesitated on making the move, whatever that move is. Maybe it is a physical move to a new place. Maybe it is a move to a new job, uh, doing something different. And they need to hear stories like like yours, that despite shit going wrong, you can still live the life that you want and you can still develop into a fully whole person, even if shit doesn't go right all the time. It doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah, I always wonder about those people that are like, oh, I moved to this country and I just live here. I don't even know how you do that. Like, I don't know how they decided, oh, this first country I went to was amazing. Let me just live here and stay here. That has not been my experience. I don't even know what that's like. However, I say I could live in Panama. I like Panama. I could live in Panama. However, I didn't feel like my journey ended there. I wanted to move around and bop around and go different places. And people are like, well, how do you do that with a wheelchair? And how do you do that with the crutches and all of that? And I do plan that part. I plan my luggage. I reach out to the airline. I let them know we're coming. When I went back to the States, I got rid of the manual wheelchair. After pushing that thing across the bridge from Panama to Costa Rica, I was a no. Like, we actually did a fundraiser because his doctor was like, I don't think he can operate an electric wheelchair. And I'm like, have you met my son? But he doesn't talk to them. So as far as they're concerned, I guess they think he's a vegetable. I'm like, you don't know my kid very well. So, I was like, okay, that's fine. My mom was like, well, let's raise some money. I'm very big on in the community in Atlanta and special needs and everything. I mean, people were giving me money, like Young Chefs Academy donated money. Like, they gave me, like, I had about half in donations. I took my money with the other half and I got us an electric wheelchair. And I was like, all right, we out of here. This is our travel chair. My son got in there, moved it around a little bit. Now he's just fine. He can manage the Mexican streets, the DR streets. He like, whatever. It is what it is.
Yeah, no, I would imagine that, there may be somebody who is listening to this that has mobility issues of their own, or maybe like you would be traveling with somebody who has it. And so, I don't know, do you have advice or tips for, because as we said before, you don't know what you don't know until you don't know it. And sometimes that
Right.
is a very inopportune time. So if somebody is like, I don't want these mobility issues to keep me from seeing the world, what are some things, like you mentioned, calling the airline, upgrading from the manual wheelchair. For you to say that it can roll in the Mexican streets, all right, because Mexico City is not accessibility friendly. It just isn't.
Believe it or not, it's better than some places. Sadly enough, yeah. So it's actually not one of the worst places I've been to. So what I would say, if you have mobility issues, the metropolitan cities are really the better places to go. They're going to have, and I know you're like, these streets aren't good, but these are some of the
At
better
least they're not
streets.
like dirt roads.
Right, right. These are some of the better streets. You're not trying to go over gravel. But cities that have bikes are typically going to be the most mobility friendly cities
Okay.
because they have ramps. So even though they didn't put those ramps in for mobility, the bikes have to go up and down. That's like when I went to Playa del Carmen. That's something I noticed because they are a bike friendly city. They are also a wheelchair friendly city. When you go out into some of these suburb areas, they're not going to be as wheelchair friendly or as friendly with the crutches. We stayed on the beach in the DR, and then I would have him use his crutches because he would gain strength and endurance. Whereas they expected him to decline, he has not declined at all.
Oh my
He actually has
gosh.
gotten better. So, what one of our doctors told us was that there was a disorder, I forget which one it was, that they thought you decline over time. However, what they found was that people that did more and didn't slow down, they actually got better. They either stayed the same or got better. So that is no longer a degenerative disorder. So basically, he uses my story with my son as this may not be degenerative. We don't know that this is. So, what I would say is if you have mobility problems, the best thing for you to do is be in one of these places where you can move as much as you're capable of. Because if your body, the way that your body and your brain works, you create these new pathways. So, that's just like when you're learning in school. That's why kids can soak things up the way that they do because your brain creates pathways the more you learn. So, the more you push your body, I'm not saying, push yourself to the point where you injure yourself, but the more you push, you build that endurance, you build up that strength. My son, before we may walk around the mall. Now, I mean, he's walked a mile with his crutches,
Wow.
and that was unheard of before we left Atlanta. So for me, I actually feel like being abroad is better for him. We eat better, the foods are fresh. You can go to the little stands, pick stuff up. We're not eating McDonald's. We got back and saw his doctor. He had lost 10 pounds. In the past year. And it wasn't like we were on a diet, we were just eating healthier foods. When we're looking at the medications, I bring medicines with me. However, there's typically an equivalent in most of these countries, and you don't need a prescription. Now, if you have narcotics, that may be a little bit different, but most of these countries, like he has asthma, so you can pick up the Singulair at the doctor's office. You just put it in Google. What is Singulair in this country? You put it in there, and you know what it is. If you don't see Singulair, put in the generic name and then say, what is this in this country, or what is this in Spanish? Like albuterol is Brevacid or something like that. So it's no longer albuterol. So you just get the equivalent of that. If you need a brand name medication, you ask your doctor for 6 months of it. Do 6 months. I've had it where people come visit me and I'll have them bring me something that I need. Everything that you can find in the States, you can find online, overseas. His crutches broke. I found a store that sold crutches because somebody here got to use crutches, right? So, I found a store that sold crutches. If there's anything that he needs, I find it. I also try to create a community. I normally have a nanny. He's with his nanny right now, so I'll get a nanny, I'll vet them. I carry a camera with me. So, like right now, all I got to do is pick up my phone and I can see everything that's happening in the other room. So, it's those, you make a few changes, but some of these things, are things that I would have done there. I just now do where I am. and I let people know, I'll ask parents, y'all want to meet up? My son has special needs. He's 10, do you want to meet up? You could tell me no, you could tell me yes. However, what I have found is that foreign countries are more accepting of my son than Americans.
It, in the US, because both of my older brothers had special needs. We in the US, I find that we tend to hide those people away. Um, like not like, oh, we lock them in the attic, but
Right,
we kind of feel like, oh, we might not send them to the birthday party. We may not do this. They may not be like an integral part of the community. And I've observed the same thing you have, that in other countries, it's like, no, you know, Johnny got one leg, but he's still out here at the fiesta with everybody else,
right,
that sort
right.
of thing.
And I think it's because a lot of other cultures are so family focused. I remember when because I do a combination of world schooling and homeschooling. And I remember when I first got into world schooling, and one of the girls, she was like, hey, they have these hubs. So basically, if you're not familiar with world schooling, it's basically like where you use your world as your school instead of doing a lot of books, paper, pen, stuff like that. And these hubs, they are some people that get together from different countries, and they learn together using the environment. And I remember I've contacted two hubs, both run by Americans, and they were just basically like, no, because he had, they said without saying, because he had special needs. I don't think they were interested in what extra it would take. Now, I didn't even mind going with him, because my son is one of those people that, he sounds worse on paper than he is. Like once you meet him, you like, oh, okay, go ahead, have fun, boy, do whatever. But, he sounds worse on paper. So I don't mind going with him. But they basically were like, no, we don't, well, it was like, oh, well, because of the terrain, we don't want to have him. Well, he in this country, right? So he already walking on this
But
terrain.
that makes me think about something. Somebody I went to high school with has 4 kids with special needs. And one of the things that she posted, and I'm sure you've seen it, is kind of like in the US, when we have another kid with us and they come across somebody who is differently abled in some way, our response is always, don't stare, don't do this. We never encourage, like, why don't you go say hi? Why don't you
Right,
introduce yourself? Why don't you, like, do you have any questions? And that's what this behavior reminds me of. Not looking like, well, what could his presence in this hub, how
right,
could the other kids benefit from being around somebody who's a little different? It sounds
right.
like there was no thought given to that. It's just about, oh, this is how it's going to inconvenience us.
Right. And what's interesting is, knowing some of the other kids that were going, I was like, well, y'all concerned about my kid. That kid got ADD and they about to give you a run for your money. Like, but my kid is pretty much gonna, do his own thing and be good. So, but it was one of the individuals, she did reach back out to me because I did a post. I have my YouTube, so I'm very vocal, especially when it comes to disabilities. So she was like, I didn't mean to do that. How can I do this? In the past, we had this kid, he had anger issues and all of these different things. And I explained to her that something like ADHD, ADD is totally different than a physical disability. They're not the same.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Psychiatric versus physical disabilities and special needs are totally different. So you can't group them together. You can't assume that because a child or an individual has a mobility issue or they may be behind or delayed a little bit, that means that they're going to be angry or bad or whatever that may be. Like normally people are like, your kid's amazing. Can you take the rest of these? So, that was the thing. But what was crazy was in the DR, someone had told me about this camp. And I messaged the camp on WhatsApp and I was like, hey, I was thinking wanted to know about your camp, but my son has special needs and he uses crutches. And they're just like, come on, come on. And I'm like, well, do you want to meet with us first? No, bring them. Just make sure you have lunch. Does he have any allergies? Bring them. And when I tell you, they welcomed him with open arms. They were like, they only speak speak a little English. It may be one or two people that speak English. And, they're like, oh, they're talking to him. They're like, he plays soccer. He's playing soccer. He likes to read, when it was time for us to go, because unfortunately I found it on the tail end of our visit. So they were like, oh, we're so sad he's leaving. They did a party, like all of these different things. But when I went to the hub with the Americans, they like, oh no, we don't even want to meet them. We just don't even want, like, we're good. So I think it's like night and day.
It
living.
sounds like the decision you made and the way that y'all are living your life, that you both are benefiting from it immensely. So that tells me whether I didn't even ask you this, like what fears you had, or like if there were family members being like, girl, that's crazy, don't do that. But if those things did exist, it sounds like, that was not necessary, because it sounds like you both are coming through this like wonderfully, which is awesome.
Yeah, I think that initially people thought it was like, are you really gonna do this? Have you lost your mind? Like, but I think the one person that stood out was my mom. My mom was always, and still is my cheerleader. Like, she's like, at first she was a little hesitant, but she was like, you just gotta live your life, however that looks for you. I've been working. My mom's one of those people. I've been working at this job for over 20 years. I can't stand this job. She's like, so if you can go out here and be happy, be happy. If anyone says anything wrong, my mom will take care of them. It won't even make it to me. But, and when I came back this year, she was like, I'm just so happy he's not in school here. She was like, between the shootings, and all of these things going on, she was like, I'm just so happy. I just, because I started to wonder, I was like, am I making the right decision? Because you start going to the doctors and they're like, well, what do you mean he's not in school? Why is he homeschooled? You start doing that, because when we went back, we visited the doctors, and I even had one doctor tell me, well, I feel like it would be better if you put him back in school. It would just be easier for you. I didn't say it was
I'm
hard
about to
for me.
say, who asked you for that?
Like, I mean, I have hard days, but I had hard days when the kids were in school, right? So but I would not forgive myself if I came back, put him in school, and there was a shooting in the school, or if something happened to him in the school. When they do the testing, because when you have kids with special needs, they do all these psychological testing. He's doing better. What is showing is that he's learning a lot, so we do regular schooling, we do world schooling, but he's learning so very much. And, my mom was like, I'm amazed. She was like, she's one of those people, I wish I could do what you're doing. She was like, but it's really amazing. And I really just have to tell people that it is, she was like, I talk about it all the time. So I think that even if you don't have a lot of people in your corner, I have one person I was really good friends with. And when I left, she basically was like, we couldn't be friends because we hung out all the time. And now I was going to be gone. And it was just going to be difficult for her. And I was like, but the phone still works and you could come visit. But you just never really know where people are going. And that was really hurtful for me because I'm such a people person. I'm like, I don't want to lose my friend, but I was like, what? So I think that sometimes just having that one person in your corner that's your cheerleader is amazing. Because I would not have even thought my mom would be my cheerleader. Like, my mom would be like, girl, you lost your mind if you don't sit down somewhere. But she has. And even with my daughter, I'm always like, I'm a phone call away, you're a flight away,
And that's the other thing, because when I left, my oldest was 21, the youngest was 15, so she came with me. And talking, like in the work that I do, I talk to a lot of women who are planning to take some time off, travel, maybe they want to move abroad, and there's this concern about like, but I will be leaving my kid behind. And it's like, I think when we become mothers, maybe we forget what it was like when we were 19. Like,
That
we
part.
was not checking for moms. Like, we were out living our lives, which is very
Right.
much what my children do. That's one of the reasons I don't come back to the States very often, because when I do, it's like, okay, well, we can get together for dinner, but they have jobs, they have lives, they are living their lives. I am a phone call away. We video chat, you know, if need be, like the youngest, when she finished high school in Texas, she flew to come hang out with me in Mexico. Like, we don't
Mhm.
have to physically be there to still continue to be there for our children.
And that's funny because I think it was in your group. I saw a post today, and someone said, "Do you feel guilty leaving your kids?" And I think she was just going on vacation.
Yeah.
And
And
I was like, when I told my daughter, whenever I would tell her I'm going to Panama or I'm going to such and such, I'm like, "Are you gonna miss me?" She'd be like, "You'll be back next week, right?
yeah,
Ain't you coming back?" Like,
we are, as women, we are conditioned that we are supposed to give up everything for everybody else except ourselves. If
mhm.
we do this thing for our kids, that's fine. We do this thing for our partners or our parents. But when you say, you know what, I'm going to do this thing solely for myself, that's when people want to start throwing around selfish. And
Mhm.
I am of the mindset that selfish should not be a word with a negative connotation. Because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of nobody else.
That's the truth. And I had to learn that the hard way. Like, I mean, I would dig myself. I think I was digging myself into a grave, taking care of the kids, trying to make sure my son had everything, especially after I had first got divorced, trying to make sure I did everything for him, trying to make sure I kept my daughter's life normal. It was a lot. It was a lot of giving to everybody but me. And it's kind of like I would get depleted. Like, I would get to the point that, I mean, my family will come over and say, "Let me take care of the kids so you can sleep." I literally would sleep for almost 24 hours, it felt like, because I was doing so much. Like, I felt like I was physically getting sick because I was trying to be
Because you
everybody,
were.
everything to everybody. Yeah. And I needed, what I found is I have to have a vacation. I don't know how people build up vacation time and be like, at the end of the year, they got all their time left. I had to take vacations. I was the person during COVID. My mom was like, "I watch the kids go." I was the person that when they said we could get on the flight, I went to St. Thomas twice. Like, I was on that flight, and I was like, "Oh, is it bad for me to leave?" Da, 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 da. My daughter like, "You coming back?" Like, that was always her response. "You coming back?" Before COVID, she had band and she had friends and she had this and she had that. She ain't have time for me.
Nobody expects a man to feel guilty
Right.
when he chooses to do something for himself instead of for his children.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody. But because I was born this way, automatically I'm just supposed to. No, I know. I reject
Mm-hmm.
that. We don't do that over here. And I also, and I'm like you, I was guilty of that. I was raised that way too. And it got to the point that I was like, if I don't choose me, there's not going to be a me left.
Right.
So
Right.
that's what I got to do.
Right.
Okay. So you've mentioned your YouTube channel. Tell us a little bit about that.
So my YouTube, actually, I didn't even start it because of me. I started because somebody else told me to record my journey. Because they were just like, nobody else is doing this. Like, you need to show other people how you live this life. So I jumped on Stephanie's YouTube challenge, and from there it kind of went. Is Charisma Cares Travels the World, and basically I show how me and my son travel around to different countries, different things that we do, how we enjoy it. But I also have, like, on most Tuesdays around 8:30 Eastern. I sit down and I kind of do a powwow and we talk about different things. We talk about life. We talk about our whys, our hows. We talk about all kinds of things because a lot of what I talk about is just that raw material. I feel like there's a whole lot of channels that tell you all the great things, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not a whole lot that tell you the things that go wrong. Like I remember being in the DR after I got hurt, credit card almost got ate up. So I did a video on like failure as an expat, and it was amazing because I went on the Black Sit group, and they're like, "You haven't failed. You're doing good. Do this, do that." That community, but and so many people have said, "Well, nobody ever talked about those things, those missing flights, and all of that." So I like to bring light to the good and the bad. I also talk about my real estate investing and that journey because one of the reasons I came back to the state was to buy more property as the market started to go down. So I talk about that as well. It's kind of a combination of those things, just kind of my life, the investing, and just how things go.
Okay. All right. So Charisma Cares travels the world on YouTube. Um, before we close this out, is there, or how we will close this out, is there something you would say to, let's say, Charisma from 5 years ago was listening to this? What would you say to her?
Um, I would say follow your heart, follow your dreams. 5 years ago, I had just got out of nurse practitioner school and I was already having the doubts that according to society, I really shouldn't have had, right? Because I had just accomplished this goal. But it's just following your heart, your dreams, and I think that path will lead you where it is that you need to go. I don't think that it'll lead you wrong. If you do something that seems wrong, it's a lesson that you just needed to learn at that point.
Absolutely, absolutely. The universe tends to unfold as it should. If
Yeah.
if it's not for you, that's you're supposed to learn something from it. Very much so.
Yeah.
I believe that.
So I would like to add one more thing.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone would like to donate to KIF1A.org, that is the nonprofit for my son's disorder. We're always looking for donations because we're working on a cure for the children.
KIF, KIF,
1A.
the number one and the letter A
Mm-hmm.
.org.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Perfect.
Yep.
All right. That's a good story, right? I knew that y'all would enjoy hearing from Charisma. All right. So, one of the things we forgot to mention is that if you are a mom and you would like to travel with your child who's got a physical disability, Charisma does do some one on one coaching in that area. In the description of this podcast, you should find a link if you want to find out more about that. But when I think about, some of the things that Charisma says, uh, there are a couple of things that sort of stand out to me. You know, um, so many times we get caught up in trying to plan for every eventuality, and often delay our happiness, delay following our dream because we're trying to work out a plan. And, one thing her story shows us is that, okay, things are not going to always go to plan, and that's beyond your control. You cannot worry about things that are beyond your control. So when things don't go to plan, just come up with a new plan. There are unlimited numbers of plans out there. So don't be so married to whatever plan A or plan B or plan J is. Um, hearing that her son, who had been diagnosed with this degenerative disease and told, like, things are going to decline, to hear that he has actually improved and stabilized, I think there is a larger message for us there, that when we accept like the status quo, when we are living a life that doesn't fully fulfill us, we let's be real, we kind of become stagnant, and we continue to do that. I think eventually we will decline, but that when you mix things up, when you start doing those things that you shouldn't do, and who determines that? Society? I don't know. That may be where you actually start to see improvement of your life. So, Carissa's life improved when she pursued full-time travel. And everything in our society says, as a mom of a kid with disabilities, that's not something she should be doing. My life sure as hell improved when I left the US. And that's not something a mother and a grandmother is supposed to do. So, like, fuck what you're supposed to do, basically, is what I think one of our takeaway messages is. Now, depending on when you are finding this podcast episode, if you're finding it in November 2022, and you find yourself being one of the women we've talked about who feels stuck, who feels a little unfulfilled, uh, myself, along with Ivana Robinson, we're hosting a workshop on November 18th about how to align your goals, your time, and your money. So if you're feeling stuck, you might want to check out this workshop. It is free of charge. There is a link in the description if you're interested in that. But yeah, guys, I hope you leave this episode with a renewed commitment to exploring whatever your dream is, so that you can become the fullest, most developed and whole version of yourself that you can. So thank you, guys. I'm sorry that I inadvertently took off a month. That was not the plan, but we're back. Thank you so much for the support. If you are watching this on YouTube, please subscribe, turn on notifications. If you're listening to this on a podcatcher, be sure to leave a review. Subscribe if that is a possibility for the podcatcher that you're using. All of those things are very helpful in getting other women to be able to find the podcast. All right, till next time.